Hello, today is July 2nd, 2020. My name is Cristián Doña-Reveco. I am interviewing Cristina Castro-Matukewicz for the Conversaciones Oral History Project, Voces of a Pandemic project at the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Criss Library at UNO. This project is in partnership with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Cristina, that this interview will be placed in the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Dr. CC and Mabel L. Criss Library, and share with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. Because we're not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consenting. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are several questions we need to make sure you agreed to before we go on. And these are the questions. The Office of Latino and Latin American Studies and Criss Library wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Dr. CC and Mabel L. Criss Library. UNO's Criss Library will retain copyright of the interview and any other materials you donate to the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies at UNO. First question, do you give the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at UNO's Criss Library?
Yes.
Do you grant UNO's Criss Library right, title, and interest and copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes.
Do you agree to allow UNO's Criss Library to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes.
Do you grant the Office of Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes.
We have many questions in a pre-interview form that we already filled out. We use the information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to the Benson Library at UT Austin and Criss Library, we'll have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members so that it will not be part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at the Benson Library and Criss Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at the Benson?
Yes.
On occasion, OYES and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes.
Thank you, Cristina. Okay. So if you at any point you have stories or anecdotes that you wish to share, please let me know, and you can just share them. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you were born, about how you came to the U.S., your life here in the U.S., etc.
Yes. So I was born in Colombia, in South America. I was born in Barranquilla, which is a city in the Caribbean. So my ancestry is reflective of the majority of people in that part of the world. I have the majority of my heritage is native Colombian from Indian tribes that were in the pre-Columbian times. They live in that part of the country, and so that's the majority of my background. I also have African American heritage. and that came through the slaves that were introduced to South America in the 16th century. And then I also have a white or Caucasian background, mostly European, also from the colonization process that happened during that time. So when I came to the United States, when I was in my mid-20s, that's probably, was an interesting experience, because when people ask me what you are, and I would say I am Colombian, and they will say like, but what does it mean? Like, what you really are? And I am like, well, I am who I am. I cannot be put in a box because I have a very diverse background. When and they were asking that question, of course, about race. They wanted to know who I was. So I came to the United States, like I said, in my mid-20s. I had already completed my bachelor's degree in psychology in Colombia. I had completed a specialization in human resources management, and I came here with the intention to complete a master's degree. I ended up staying because I met my husband in a school. We went to the same school in Kansas, in Topeka, Kansas, and end up marrying there, and then moved to Omaha, and we end up building a life together here, and that has worked out really well. Have two children, two daughters, and live in Omaha for the last 20 years.
Thank you. Cristina, when did you move to US first, and then when did you move to Omaha?
Yeah, I came to the United States in 1996, and to Omaha, we moved in 1998.
And what do you do? What do you do for work? Where do you work?
Yeah. So, and I can share an anecdote here as you ask me. So when I came to the United States, before I came here, I had already a career, and I would consider a successful career in Barranquilla. And so when I came here, I found myself at the bottom of the ladder, because my, English is my second language. I didn't know anyone. I was trying to get the prerequisites to get admitted in a master's degree program. And I started at the bottom of the ladder. So I started doing work at a daycare. I mean, it was essential work. I work at a daycare, and from there I was able to get hired by a nonprofit. And then from there I came to the job I have now, which is at Wells Fargo. And I am a regional community relations manager for Wells Fargo.
And in your work, do you work with Latino organizations? Do you work with other minorities? What does it entail, your work, more in a few words?
Yeah, in a few words. So mostly we manage the Wells Fargo Foundation operations in a number of states. And yeah, we work with nonprofits a lot, all kinds of nonprofits, because we have an emphasis on low and moderate income communities. I end up working a lot with nonprofits that serve that segment. So women, people of color. So that's the bulk of the work, but we also do other programs in community relations.
But you also have several activities with the community. What you're not related to directly to work. Can you tell me a little bit about those activities?
Yeah, we do some other work that is not directly related to the community. It's
No,
tangentially. Oh, sorry.
you personally.
Oh, me personally. Oh, yes. I am personally involved. Sorry. I am personally involved because I am passionate about some causes. And I mean, it's my decision to be involved. So right now I am on the board of the Urban League of Nebraska, which is a well-known organization that works in social justice for people of color. And I am very passionate about that work. And I am on the board of the AIM Institute, which is a nonprofit. It's based in Omaha, serves mostly the Omaha area. And they work in education, in workforce development. And that's another passion of mine, because again, from my background, when I came to this country, I had to learn a new way of work. So especially for minorities and immigrant communities, workforce development programs are very important. So those are two organizations I am currently involved with, but I have been involved with other organizations in the past. I was on the board of the Susan G. Komen Foundation in Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And women's health issues are also important for me. And I was on the board of the Omaha Community Foundation. That's a philanthropy a function that they cover, and that's important for my job, but also because I think philanthropy can help alleviate some of the social problems we have. So it was important for me to share my voice on that board. And I was the board chair of the Midlands Latino Community Development Corporation and was one of the founders. That organization focused on economic development for Latinos. And again, that speaks to my passion for people of color and immigrant communities. So those are some of the organizations I've been involved with.
Thank you. So now we're going to move or start talking about COVID-19 and the last 6 months, or maybe a little bit more. Tell me, how did you first learn about COVID-19?
That's a really good question. I don't think anyone have ever asked me. So I first learned of COVID-19 in December of 2019. And, quite honestly, I have a subscription to a very Time magazine, which all of us know what it is. And they had an article in December about this novel virus that was starting to develop in the central province of China in Wuhan. And I do remember clearly that they had a map in that magazine in December, the first week of December. And they were saying that this one will be different. And the reason is because Wuhan was not just a manufacturing center for China, but also a transportation hub. And they had like arrows and lines showing like, here is a train station, here is an airport, here is a bus station. And this is how close those places are from where the virus was supposed to have been originated. I was like, wow, this is not good. This is not good news. And from there, it just went on and on and on, and it just went worse. Yeah.
And when did you realize that was arriving into Omaha or to Nebraska, and the effects it could have in the city?
Yeah, I followed the trajectory of the virus very closely from there. And, and I remember in January, February, I had sleepless nights thinking about this virus. And I mean, I knew this was going to be bad. And when it arrived to the United States in late January, I was like, this is it. I mean, there is no way to contain this. And when we had the first cases in Omaha, actually the first cases were in native cases, were people who were brought from some of the cruises and places where people had been infected, because we have a biocontainment unit in Omaha for infectious diseases. So those were first cases were imported that way. And then the community contamination started. And that's when I think most people here started to realize, oh, now it's here. And I was like, yeah, and it was just a matter of fact before it comes here.
And so when did you stopped going to work in your office and you moved to, because you're now working at home, when did you start working at home?
Yeah, it was in the middle of March. I think my company was very proactive in making decisions about working from home. And for people in my type of job, that is really easy to make that transition from office work to home based work. That decision was made right away. So I have been working from home since middle of March.
Mhm. And how has COVID impacted you and you and your family? So you have two daughters that they are in college and in high school, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and your husband, how has it impacted you as a family in terms of working from home, um, people in your family outside of the U.S. in Colombia, etc.?
Yeah, I would say that COVID-19 has impacted all of us and every aspect of our life. We are fortunate that so far we have not gotten infected, neither in my family here, my nuclear family here, or my family in Colombia, but we have been impacted in many ways. I mean, the fact that both my husband and I are working from home and we have to navigate the new circumstances, dividing the house is almost like a map in the house. What is his work area? What is my work area? For my two daughters has been also a very difficult transition. Neither one of them was able to finish school on site. They had to transition to online learning. And I have my oldest daughter has also um, some pre-existing health conditions that put her at risk. And she had to quit her job uh, in order to stay safe. So that added more constraints and a huge impact for her because she loves her job. She's something she likes doing, and well, she goes to school. For my younger daughter, she was graduating from 8th grade this year, and all the activities were canceled. And I could see how her motivation and her excitement for finishing that part of her life, her education, was vanishing as the notices for events being canceled um, were communicated, and that was really tough. She wasn't able to be together with her friends from 9 years of schooling because of all the activities that were canceled. And my family in Colombia has been under the gun as well. The social and physical restrictions are more intense there. And some of my family members that have been fortunate to work from home, their salaries have been reduced up to 50%. So that has had also an economic impact uh, for the family. And some of them have lost their jobs due to the pandemic. So it's been very impactful for all of us in different levels.
And do you send money back to your family in Colombia?
Yes, I do. That's one of the things how you can be supportive and help, and sometimes it's not even just the money. Sometimes doing acts of kindness. I for So I have a friend who lost her job in Colombia because of this, and she resorts to selling some stuff. I mean, she sells like cheese, like artisan cheeses and things like that. So I came up with the idea of making a bulk order of what she's selling, and then sending it to my family, to each one of my siblings and nieces. And so that made their day to get a gift, but also help my friend. And then for Mother's Day and Father's Day, I also arranged with one of my nieces who had to close her restaurant because of the pandemic. I arranged with her to prepare some meals and to give it to the moms in the family and to the dads in the family and help them celebrate in quarantine those occasions. So sometimes those acts of kindness are very important because show people that it's not just about having food to eat, it's also about feeling that you are loved and others are thinking of you.
Mhm. Yes, that's very, very important. Um, in terms of besides the direct help that you've been doing, you mentioned that you've sent money or to pay this. Have you had any issues in actually sending funds? Has it become easier? Has it become harder? Um, or is no difference?
Well, from my end, it's no difference. I think I use a service that actually Wells Fargo provides, and I use that. And for me, it's really easy to do it. That hasn't changed. For them, on the contrary, has become harder because of what I said before, the social distancing and physical distancing restrictions. They also cannot get out of their house every day like we do here. They have people have, depending on the last two digits of their identification, they have days in which they can go out. So sometimes they are not able to go get the money to the bank or to the place where they are designated to pick it up. So that's very unfortunate because if they need the money to pay the rent this week and their day to get out is not until next week, there is like this gap, and I get really worried about that.
Yeah, I know that. I've been through the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So moving on to a different set of questions, you mentioned that your daughter has some health concerns, and well, this is a health issue in general. What are your concerns, or how have your concerns about health changed now with COVID-19? And what have you done about them?
Yeah, I think the concerns about health have intensified since December. Because before it was in general, about her staying healthy and, doing what she needed to do to stay in good health, good diet, taking medications, what have you. Um, and then now the concern is about how can she protect herself from the risk that exists out there. And that was part of the reason why the decision was made for her to quit her job or to suspend her job. And I think the mindset in which we live in my family right now is that we have to protect ourselves. We cannot expect in the United States that other people are going to be protective of us. It's our personal responsibility to do that, wearing masks, doing everything that we need to do. Do not expect other people to be conscious about it and to help us with that task.
Yeah. And have you seen any differences in your family and your extended family about how this has impacted their mental health as well?
Just the concept of having to stay home and not being able to get out is a psychological weight that we all carry. And I would say here is not as bad as in Colombia because there is very strict, and I think it's harder. So I should not complain, and I am not, insinuating that I should complain, but it still is hard because it still is there. The fact that you can go out. I can go out in the next hour if I want, but the limitations that are there because I know that I have to protect myself. So it's not physical, it's psychological, and it causes stress. I have nightmares about that. Yeah. And so my children, I can see my daughters being, reluctant sometimes to go to places that are considered safe or less risk because they don't want to be exposed and leaving the house without a mask. Oh my gosh, no. God forbid, right? That's such an essential thing to leave. Better forget your cell phone than your mask. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. So you've been an active member of the community, both in your job in Wells Fargo and then in the several other organizations that you have worked, that you participate as volunteers, community work. How do you think the work of those organizations themselves, so the Omaha Community Foundation, the Urban League, AIM Institute, has changed due to COVID-19?
Oh goodness, yes, it has changed. How it has changed. They had to exercise their flexibility muscles uh, and pivot their programs and services to make sure that they were responsive to the situation. And I would say for the Omaha Community Foundation, for example, in May every year for the last 7 or 8 years, they have had a campaign. It's called Omaha Gives. And huge part of that campaign, I mean, the campaign is to promote giving in the community and encourage people to donate to nonprofits on Omaha Gives Day. But big part of that campaign is doing social events that are usually is the non-profits participating, encourage people to get together and to come and celebrate giving. And none of that could happen this year. It just happened virtually, and that's a big change. And for them, it meant having to be very nimble and flexible when they created a fund to help nonprofits to with the needs that they have with the pandemic. I mean, the nonprofits that are in the basic needs area, they were providing grants to those nonprofits to help them serve their constituencies. And having to raise that money so quickly was a challenge, but they had to do it. They had to shift priorities. They were on a track that they were working out, and all of a sudden it's like, oops, stop that. Let's move to this because this is an emergency. And organizations that have that ability to be flexible usually respond well in those circumstances. The Urban League was even more drastic, I think, because 100% of their programs are in person. They have, for example, a youth attendance navigator program, which is one of my favorites. And they track students who are at risk of truancy in a school, and they assign a navigator that helps them, checks with them every day to make sure that they go to school and that they attend classes and that they are attending the after school program. Um, so what do you do if the school is closed? And you're not supposed to be close to people. I mean, social distancing. So huge changes to their programs. How do you pivot those programs to become online or virtual programs overnight? It's a huge task, and I am proud that they have been able to convert their programs into a virtual format and try to be as responsive as they can.
And in terms of the funding that these organizations receive, these donations through Omaha Gives and others, do you think that they went down a lot? They did not change?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. And I would say I will put my philanthropy hat here and say that it's a mixed bag. I think organizations that are in that basic needs pocket have fared better than organizations that are not, because people are donating and corporations, foundations, individuals are seeing the need and they are being responsive. I mean, and I would say I don't mean to, that they are the only ones, but let's say like a food bank or a homeless shelter. those are basic needs organizations, and people tend, to think about the basic needs. Who needs the most at this time? So I think they have received an influx of help that they need and is necessary for them in order to go through this time. I think other organizations that are not in that basic needs bucket, and I would say probably the arts is one of them, the organizations in the arts sphere, they probably haven't seen that type of community support. And I know that they are also not getting any revenue if they are especially in the performing arts and even museums. If they are closed, they don't get the revenue. And they had to cancel exhibits and they had to cancel performances, which is a big chunk of the revenue. And on top of that, they are not getting the widespread support like some other organizations are. So it's a mixed pocket.
Mm-hmm. Moving a little bit on more specifically on the Latino community in Omaha, how have you seen the impact of COVID-19 on the Latino community?
Yes, we all know how disproportionate the impact of COVID-19 has been in people of color and minority communities. And of course, there is a reason for that. We have a higher percentage of Latinos are working in the service industry, in the what is called essential workers industry. And I think the meat packing plants are a good example of that. When the president of the United States and the governor of Nebraska declared that meatpacking plant workers were essential workers and they wouldn't allow for those plants to close, that put those communities, those individuals at risk immediately. And I understand that it's very difficult to transform a plant setting, a factory setting, to become a socially distanced workplace. That is very hard to do, but there were other things that probably could have done to ensure that people weren't unnecessarily exposed to the virus. And I think in Nebraska in particular, in Omaha, we have seen a much higher rate of infection among Latinos and other people of color because of that. And unfortunately, like we know, it's not as easy for people who work in an hourly wage and who have attendance requirements, very strict attendance requirements in their job, to take time off to go get a test, or if they get sick, to be able to stay home until they fully recover if they want to keep their job. So all of those and several other factors compounded has contributed to a very poor result for Latinos and other people of color with this virus, this pandemic, and the consequences for opportunities to move and advance financially and socially for our Latino community are going to be devastating, because this crisis has set us back enormously.
Yes. Now, one of the things about South Omaha and the Latino community here in Nebraska is that there are several organizations that are hands-on working with them, and that are assisted by foundations such as Omaha Community Foundations and Wells Fargo and others. Have you seen what kind of impact COVID-19 has had on those particular organizations, the ones that work with Latinos in the Latino community?
Yeah, and again, there is a mixed bag, right? I think some nonprofits that work with and in the Latino community have been very fortunate that before the crisis, they had the connections, and they had earned the trust of some key founders in the community, private foundations, individuals, and corporations. So when the time for the crisis time came, it was easier for them to go and talk about the need and talk about the uh, uh, the crisis and receive assistance. Indeed, a group of those organizations received funding from the Omaha Community Foundation almost immediately, and also some others were able to participate in a program that was created by several private and corporate foundations in which they have raised money to help individuals and small businesses that don't have access to government programs. And those are very, very, very vulnerable communities. I mean, if you own a small business and you're working with an IT, you are not going to get PPP. Uh, you are not going to get We Care Act funds. So you are on your own, and a very conscious group of people and businesses, corporations, step up and say, we have to pull up some money to help this segment of the community. So those Latino nonprofits that were known to those founders have been able to access access the assistance and then pass it on to the people. Some others have not. I'll be honest with you. Some others didn't have those connections, didn't have those relationships, and it's very hard to build those relationships in a time of crisis.
Yes. And have you seen some of the work these organizations have done with the community?
Yeah, I have, and indeed I have been a part of some of that work. I will say the coalition that I was mentioning, that there are several of the major private foundations in Omaha and some corporations, individuals that are fueling or funneling funding to help people who don't qualify for CARES Act or PPP funding. I am a part of that group, and indeed the idea came because we were doing, and I want to say we at Wells Fargo, we were working on a similar program in South Dakota, and then we were talking to some people here in Nebraska, some nonprofits, and telling them, hey, this program in South Dakota, we helped to spearhead it, something like this. We're working in Nebraska, and they were thinking about the same. And some of those private foundations were thinking about the same. So it was a very coalescence of interests and ideas that came together, and we provided some of the templates and background that helped to speed up the process here. So it took really a very small amount of time to get that that coalition formed and the funding the funds to be raised and the money to get out the door. So yeah, I have been participating in some of those initiatives and have seen firsthand how Latinos of different uh, stages in life that are in need of $500, a $1,000 gift, and those are grants, those are not loans, to make rent this month, how they have been helped. Yeah.
We talked at some point yesterday, the other day, that you had participated in some of the social movements recently. How has COVID-19 impacted whether you decide to participate and how you participate in this, considering that you're always looking to take care of yourself and to protect yourself and your family?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say it's interesting because I was thinking about it last night. I was watching something on TV that made me think about that and how for me particularly, I am not, I am more of an introvert type of person. So I am not the one who is going to be posting on Facebook every thought that comes through my mind. But I like to read what people post. So you won't see me in that atmosphere. And with the concerns that we have about transmission, we are not also the ones that are going to be attending every rally. But I would say we have attended rallies, and my daughters and my sister, and we all have been together. We have worn masks um, and had hand sanitizer handy at all times. I mean, we did what we could to protect ourselves, but we did attend a couple rallies, and I think that's a COVID-19 impact right there, because in other circumstances, I would probably have been more involved in not just attending the rallies, but spearheading the work that people were doing out in the community. But again, because of the virus, we didn't feel it was safe. But then there are other ways how you can help. I mean, we have donated funds to key organizations, have helped to educate. I mean, we have had tough conversations at home about um, the inequity that exists in this country. And those are tough, painful conversations, but we have had them, and I think that's important. And I have been supportive of friends and people I know that this has been an extremely painful time for them, and just being there for them in an individual basis.
Thank you. Now let's talk about the future. So how do you think the world's going to change, right? How different is going to be the world after COVID-19 or in a few years, in terms of your own work in social organizations, in terms of the Latino community, in terms of everything that surrounds you?
Yeah, I think there is, in my opinion, there is more positive change. There is some negative in the future. I mean, it's happening now, and I think it's going to continue in the future. Some negative aspects of this situation, not just the COVID-19, but also the new awareness that we have about inequities, and racial, social, gender discrimination and inequities. So I think from the work perspective, I think corporations, businesses in general, are the ones that are serious about this. They are starting to realize that it's not about, let me say this, and I'm going to borrow this from the president of the Ford Foundation, who had a conversation with the CEO of Wells Fargo, and he said something about corporate America has to understand that the playbook has changed. The old playbook was, let's put out a press release, let's make a significant donation to a few nonprofits, and let's do a couple internal events, and maybe put someone on a board, and call it good. We did our part. The playbook has changed. The playbook is different now, because we are now understanding that we have to work internally. That part of our role is to look at what we're doing internally with our hiring practices, with our development practices, with our compensation. What opportunities people of color and women have to advance and break that glass ceiling in corporate America. And it's time for corporate America to look seriously at that. And, it's great that they give donations to nonprofits that work in social justice, but look at the social injustice inside your walls and work on that too.
And you travel to Colombia regularly, or at least until last year. How do you think your this is going to impact your future travels. Are you going to still go as every year, or how do you think it's going to impact?
Yeah, that's one of the painful things about this pandemic. I'll be honest with you. So my mom is 92 years old, and at that age, you don't know how much time God is going to want to keep her with us. And I have been enjoying the opportunity to go see her for her birthday every year. And I know this year is not going to happen. And that's very painful because then that means, I'm not going to be seeing her for a year. Well, last year could be the last time I saw her in person. And that possibility is extremely disturbing for me. That could be, I miss going there. I mean, it's just that need to be close to your family, to people you love, to be close to your homeland. And that's not going to happen this year. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if it will happen next year, unless there is a significant progress in finding a vaccine for the virus. I don't think it's going to be safe to go home in the near future, and that's sad.
Yes, I understand that completely. So those were my questions in general, and if I would want to know if there's anything else you'd like to share with me about your experiences with COVID-19 that I had not asked you yet, or anything else about COVID-19 that you want to talk about.
Yeah, I think one of my concerns, and this comes from the work I do, that gives me more of that awareness and about what's in people's minds, what's in business people's minds, what's going on with the economy, is I have I mean, it's a concern that is shared by many people, and is how the pandemic has increased the divide in our country. It seems like the people who were in both sides of the spectrum, in a radical position in both sides of the ideological spectrum, are digging their heels even further. And that is dividing our country, and that even more than it was before the pandemic. I mean, it's the conspiracy theories that are going on out there. I mean, it's fascinating, but it's scary. It's really scary to see what people are making uh, making up with this situation. And in the other side, you have people who want to close everything, and that's not possible either, because there has to be a balance. And I think it's very hard for people in the United States to achieve balance. We are a very polarized country, and that concerns me, not just for the outcomes of the health situation, but for what that means to our future as a society. And I worry about that because I have, like we mentioned before, I have young daughters, and I was telling, but it gives me hope because I was telling my youngest daughter yesterday something like what I am saying. She's 14. And I was saying, like, I worry about you and the world in which you're going to live with things the way they are. And she's like, Mom, don't worry about me. The people from my generation are thinking much better about how to solve those issues than the people from your generation. We're going to do a better job at this. So that gave me great hope. And I want to close with that, is that I have great faith that people like my Marisa are going to be the architects of positive change in this country.
Thank you, Cristina. That's a wonderful way of saying things for your daughter. So thank you. I'm gonna stop the recording now, and so this is the end of the interview.